A few days ago, I made a post asking for your unpopular opinion regarding the amazing digital circus. Without wasting any time, let's have a look at them. MePhone4II King says, I wish Kinger got more screen time in episode 7. I think the screen time he got in episode 7 was perfectly fine, and he will get more in episode 8. But since Kinger is one of my favorite characters, I can understand the sentiment. Linetti's Peak Name says, I am so exhausted of Jax being the creator's pet. I love this show, I love the writing, but Jax is the favorite and it's so obvious. Every single moment for other characters is taken over by Jax. Kaufman's funeral in episode 2, taken over a bit by Jax's reaction. Ragatha's emotional moment talking about her mom, barely even discussed because of Jax's discussion about Ribbit. Ragatha and Kinger's moment in episode 6, which in my opinion is the best moment in the entire show. I've never heard anyone talk about it because it's overshadowed by Jax and Pomnin's fight. Zubul and Gangle's moment in episode 6, same thing. Kane crashing out and going crazy for the first time. Nobody hardly ever discusses Kane's psyche, or what Kinger means, because everyone is so focused on Jax's flashbacks. Like at this point, it's kind of becoming a genuine problem in the writing. I still love the show, but there's not enough episodes to let one character overshadow everyone else. Regarding Jax being the creator's pet, that's something that can't be denied. I want to focus on the other part of the comment. I partially agree, because whenever a scene includes Jax, the fans tend to focus more on how he reacts to the events, which can be annoying if you care about a character that isn't Jax. But I also think that's not the show's fault. Let's take Kaufman's funeral, for example. We do get to see Jax's reaction to his abstraction, but we also get the other character's perspective. Ragatha and Zubul look sad, Gangle shows their drawings, and Kinger speaks with his eyes closed. This scene tells us something about the others too. If fans chose to focus on Jax, it's not the show's fault. And I think this can also be applied to Ragatha talking about her mom and discussing with Kinger. Zubul and Gangle's moment in episode 6, and Kane crashing out. So I get the feeling that maybe Linetti's Peak Name is more disappointed by the discussions from fans regarding the show rather than the actual show. Linette, if you're watching the video and I got the wrong idea, please feel free to tell us more in the comments section. Zephyrion says, I always get hate when I say that they are not humans, but digital copies of human brains. This is something that I've noticed as well. Some fans are very vocal about their dislike of this theory, and I honestly don't get why. This is a cartoon, so it's not impossible that in the show's world, C&A were able to develop a technology that could absorb a person's body and consciousness inside a computer, but I find it more realistic that the headset simply copied the character's consciousness. It would add another layer of existential dread because there really wouldn't be an exit. So I understand your point, and I agree. Jaxley says, the pilot is the worst episode. My brain agrees, while my heart disagrees. I will go more in depth on why in my future ranking of all episodes, which will come out after episode 9, but right now, the pilot isn't my least favorite episode. I can see why it's generally considered the worst one though. The pacing is weird, and the animation, while not terrible by any means, doesn't look as good as the later episodes. Ragatha doesn't lack a personality. She's a fleshed out character. She's people-pleasing, optimistic, anxious, a pushover, nurturing, empathetic, kind of neurotic, feels responsible for everyone, bottles in her feelings till they burst. She has wants, she has fears, she has doubts, but progresses as a character upon opening up. I honestly think the opinion of her lacking a personality is rooted in misogyny. Well, I'd say I agree with this. I personally haven't read comments from people who claim Ragatha lacks a personality, but I'm not saying that there aren't people who wrongly assume this. Maybe they think this because Ragatha is a people pleaser and can appear fake, but that's a wrong interpretation of the character. I want to focus on the last part about misogyny. In recent years, there have been countless examples of female characters who are strongly hated because of how poorly written they are. For example, the ones I am familiar with who have been under the spotlight are Rey, Galadriel, and Charlie. I think these characters deserve their critiques because they are horribly written. Their sex doesn't change that they are bland, arrogant, or an idiot Mary Sue. Don't get me wrong, there are people out there who hate women and can't stand female characters because of their sex. So it's absolutely possible that there are people who hate Ragatha because she's a girl. But I also think we shouldn't immediately dismiss someone's negative opinion just because it's about a female character. I'm sure this isn't what Jaxley meant, but I still wanted to say it. I don't think Gangle has a gimmick. I think her happy mask is a placebo, along with the Spadz's mask. This is an interesting take on the character, although I wonder why her avatar implemented it. I'm glad the amazing digital circus is ending soon, solely because it means Goose won't be drawing it out or milking it. Goose is a good writer and knows that restrictions are the yin to the narrative yang. I, too, think it's good that shows end and avoid seasonal rotting. I'd rather have fewer good episodes than endless trash. Nevi Hamilton says, I hate how the narrative completely fucking screws over Kane in favor of Jax, who has rightfully earned the spot for the show's main antagonist. Jax is the creator's pet, and I'm tired of pretending he isn't. Just because Jax is a human with a sub-story doesn't mean he's not an asshole who needs to be punished for his wrongdoings. Meanwhile, we have Kane, who, while extremely flawed himself, is marginally much better than Jax than what people give him credit for. He's not malicious, just oblivious. But the show's narrative doesn't seem to care about that in the slightest because they don't see him as a person. And that implies we're not supposed to see him as a person either. Kane has every right to crash out because of this. He's going through unfair double standards because everyone hates Kane for being himself. But people still care about Jax because he's a human. And to that, I call bullshit. And with 2 episodes left, I have no hope of episode 8 doing Kane justice as of writing this. I have expectations, but I stopped hoping, knowing that the pattern of Jack's favoritism or bias started as early as episode 5. I think the part about Kane not being seen as a person will definitely be addressed in the last 2 episodes. He's entered the crash out arc at the end of episode 6, and that's definitely going to lead to some payoff. I do wish that the cast understood that Kane isn't malicious but just oblivious. I understand them, because they are trapped in a horrible situation and view Kane as a jailer rather than a friend. And I also understand Kane, because the series showed us that NPCs can have a consciousness and feelings. So saying that he matters less just because he is an AI is wrong. He was created for a purpose, and he can't accomplish it. That must suck badly. I personally think the writing won't disappoint me, but I can understand being frustrated over the Jax favoritism. One thing I strongly agree with is that Jax is an asshole. I read way too many comments that try to justify him or downplay what he did because he's suffering. I think the reason why it's hard for a part of the fandom, me included, to sympathize with Jax is that he's the most real character. And by that I mean that unfortunately many people encounter a bully or a tormentor in their lives. The way he shot Ragatha multiple times is an example of his pettiness and cruelty. She gets one lucky shot on him, and he shoots her over and over when one hit would suffice. He gaslit Pomni and claimed he led her on just so he could hurt her more, and then said he would just forget her if she abstracted. It doesn't matter if it's an act. He still causes real emotional harm to his friends, knowingly. Being a victim of trauma doesn't make it okay to pay the emotional pain onto those around you. In my previous video, I said Gangle is my least favorite character of the main cast. And yet, the moment of the show that hit me hardest and got me genuinely sad was her confessing to Zubul that sometimes she doesn't feel like a person due to how much Jax has been tormenting her. I think we all forgot that because of the admittedly great argument at the end of episode 6. But think about it. These characters have been stuck in this digital hell for years, and Jax has been torturing Gangle so much that she doesn't even consider herself a person anymore. Jax is suffering and he doesn't deserve it, but that doesn't justify the torment he's inflicted on Gangle or other characters. As for him getting redeemed, I think it all comes down to this. It's not, can Jax be redeemed? It's, does Jax want to be redeemed? The show has already shown chemistry between Pomni and Jax in episodes 5 and 6. And it's been a solid build-up before the fight. He was friends with Kofmo and Ribbit before they abstracted. Jax can form connections with people, but he chooses to push others away. It's great that Pomni and Ragatha, too, still reached out to him in episode 7, showing once again emotional maturity, but that can only get Jax that far. You can lend a hand to someone, but in the end, they also have to make an effort and grab it. I don't want this character to not have a happy ending. In general, I'd love all of them to have a happy ending, although that probably won't happen. But I do think he has to face some sort of consequence for his actions. I hope the last 2 episodes will have a confrontation between him and Gangle where they discuss this. M. Ladybug says, I really hate Jax. He's just annoying and a bad person, and I'm tired of the fandom babying him all the time cause he's traumatized. He's also the favorite child of the series. Like, remember that he's not the only one suffering in the circus. Every single one of these people are trapped. All of them are suffering. And yes, they aren't all handling it healthily. Ragatha and Zubul are very good examples. Of course, Jax probably wasn't going to handle it in the healthiest way either. But yet, he's the only one who's decided that he was in his rights to torture everyone. He has trauma and is in pain, and decided to dehumanize everyone into archetypes because that way he can easily decide that everyone else deserves to suffer for his pain. He's been that way since before Pomni came to the circus, and even though I understand his character, I still don't like him. But the fandom acts so high and mighty, sticking by Jax despite everything but then turn on Ragatha for having one very valid crash out against the person who threw her in a deep fryer. This connects back to what I said earlier, so I won't repeat myself. And yes, sometimes it can be hard to discuss it with some Jax fans because they will tell you just don't understand his character. Nixian says, Ragatha doesn't deserve the hate. I was pretty surprised when I found out that people disliked her. I think she's one of the most relatable characters in the show. I relate to Ragatha a lot personally. I agree that Ragatha doesn't deserve the hate she gets. I think the reason why people tend to dislike her is her overtly nice attitude. They perceive it as fake, and they are partially correct, but this also does a disservice to the character. The whole point of Ragatha is that she's a people pleaser because of her abusive trauma. Knowing that, it's hard for me to hate her. By the way, Nixian has made some pretty good Hazbin Hotel videos that I recommend. Dragon Empress says, Jax is so unlikable, I don't get why so many people like him. I think they like the crazy stuff he does. And love him or hate him, he adds a lot of character tension. The show just wouldn't be the same without him. He also has a great character design, and is voiced by Michael Kovac, so there's also that. Lori Senpai-chan says, hot take, Jax is a spotlight hog. I don't mind him at first glance. But I felt that one of the reasons as to why I haven't watched the show after 6 episodes is probably because of him, in my opinion. Does he have trauma? Yes. But that is not an excuse for him to be an asshole. I get that Jax is interesting, but for the love of God, can we please focus on the other characters? Like, I love the characters interacting about their problems and issues. For example, Gangle and Zubul, Kinger and Ragatha, Kinger and Pomni, etc. While I personally can't wait to see the next 2 episodes, I understand feeling burned out from Jax's overwhelming presence in the last 3 episodes. If you don't like the show anymore, no one can force you to continue it. I still suggest watching episode 7. I personally loved it, and it gave us something more on Kane, who will definitely play a larger role in the ending. The Amazing Digital Circus isn't a romance series. I guess shipping is the core of fandoms, but people need to understand that this series is about characters having therapy and struggles, not romance. And look, I love shipping, whether romantic or platonically, although I tend to lean more on the romantic side. It doesn't mean every ship is canon. Note, I dislike shipping wars. Shipping has always been something weird for me. I don't mean that I find it weird if people like to pair characters together. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I just find it so weird how some fans focus so much on a couple, especially if they aren't canon or if the show clearly doesn't care about romance. I do like platonic ships though, because friendship is magic. Gangle, Zubul, Kinger and Ragatha are underrated. They deserve more love and appreciation. Can't say anything against that. Actual Bowl of Soup, great username by the way, says, the show is great but would have done better with an extra episode or 2. I feel like I accept their character arcs, but I would have loved to see more of Ragatha Gangle and Cricket interactions. I could see Zubul having disregard for Ragatha similar to Jax, cause they don't find her comfort pleasing in the slightest. I could really see Ragatha growing more if she got more advice from a character who simply doesn't enjoy her encouragement but from a more constructive source. Also maybe a Kinger-Zubul interaction too. There's many ways you can mash these characters around to better flesh them out. I'm happy with what I got in canon, but I would be even more happy to see this. I'm in a position where I both agree and disagree with this statement. If we take only episodes 1 to 7 into consideration, I'd say 2 more episodes wouldn't have hurt to flesh out some characters more, but we don't know what these 2 remaining episodes have in store. For all we know, they could have some well-written character arcs for Gangle, Zubul, and Ragatha. So I'd wait until the end of the show before coming to the conclusion that 2 extra episodes were needed. I feel like the Ragatha hate was a loud minority in the fandom. I only really saw it if I actively searched for it on TikTok. Otherwise, as a normal fan, most people had balanced takes on her. I feel like constantly yelling out about it feels like an overcorrection if anything. And seeing people use it as an uncommon take when it's probably the most agreed upon one feels odd. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying nobody has ever hated on her, trust me, I've seen it. But it sounds like a loud minority if anything, rather than an actual common stance within the fandom. I feel like the fandom does have an issue with simply liking the characters despite their flaws, rather than using them to demonize them. Gangle, Ragatha, Pomni and Jax seem to be heavily polarized in those minor spaces, so I will acknowledge that, if anything. It's definitely a loud minority. I don't use TikTok, but I have seen some people with this take on Reddit. Romance is fun, but assuming it's the canon interpretation can really ruin the characters. Assuming Fanny Bunny as canon can deeply ruin how these characters are working. Pomni especially, since it turns her kinda empathetic nature to, oh I can't fix him cause he's cute. Don't get me wrong, the merch is funny, but I don't really think it means anything in canon. It's just a way to garner more money to support the show. But this also doesn't mean I dislike Fanny Bunny. I'm more of a Showtime shipper myself, haha. It's fun, so many of these ships are fun, but seeing it through a Fanny Bunny lens can really hurt how these characters are actually interacting with one another. I can't empathize how much I agree with this. Shipping can be fun, and if you partake in this activity in a healthy way, then good for you. But some people get a warped idea of characters based on their headcanons on the ships. Ironically enough, I see it more on those that are critical of Jax, aka Jax haters, who framed Pomni's kindness toward him as a way to call her a pick-me or a fandom self-insert, ignoring that she only really got close with him when she had no other option. In episodes 1 to 5, she's casual around him, and gives minimal small talk with him. This is especially relatable as this is how I speak with people that aren't my friends but I don't feel the need to give a cold shoulder to. Once she got paired up with him due to Ragatha not wanting to work with Jax, She saw that he was capable of bonding with people and was hoping she could actively help him. Only seeing how deep in his own troubles he was by the end of the episode. By that point, she's already been given a reason to want to help him even more. I personally have never heard of people calling Pomni a pick-me. And forgive me if I say this, but those who think this completely misunderstood her character. Jax, even though he's a piece of shit and in any normal circumstance it would be better to just leave him be, is in desperate need of help. The circus is a closed, confined space. You can't really afford to just leave people like that, especially when the risk is dying. Of course it is added and unnecessary pressure, but it's still a real reason for why Pomni would want to help him. Jax already exhibited suicidal behaviors in episode 7, such as giving away his belongings despite them being very important to him. So the allegory of abstraction to suicide, though somewhat involuntary, is very real. I understand that many of the circus members are struggling, but Jax seems to be the one handling it the worst, as he constantly isolates himself, leading to a worse mental state. Most if not all of the characters but Jax are finding a community within the circus, meaning while they aren't 100% okay, they don't seem to be at full risk of abstraction, at least not as much as Jax is exhibiting. Coming from my own experience as a therapist friend, aka what Pomni is kinda going through, I've seen many of my friends go through a variety of struggles. But I could always tell some of them were actively doing habits that made them at risk to hurting themselves. And I would do my best to try and help in fear of them committing. This is also forgetting the most important key moment that happens in the Amazing Digital Circus that I think portrays the main message of the show. Episode 3, the conversation Kinger and Pomni have, by far has to be the most obvious drive for Pomni to try to help people in the circus. Kinger, the longest-lasting member of the circus, tells her the worst thing you can do is make someone feel like they aren't wanted or loved. That right there is the most integral aspect to surviving the circus, which is the obvious drive for why Pomni is super empathetic, maybe even to a fault, considering episode 7. Pomni may be the most grounded and empathetic character, but she still isn't perfect, and she is not a pick-me. I know actual bowl of soup is just stating the obvious because they paid attention when they watched the show, but this is all true. I think Pomni is doing the right thing by continuing to try to get closer to Jax, although I still think he has to make an effort. And yes, considering what Jax did in episode 7, I do think Pomni's empathy toward him may be to a fault, but that discussion would require another video. And this part of actual bowl of soup's comment perfectly explains why I like Pomni so much. It's great to have a protagonist who is so empathetic, unlike someone else. Frankly, a lot of my criticisms toward any character's lander in the show is that while yes, them being complex isn't a guarantee for you to like them, but it also means you really need to understand the character if you don't. That sort of bias can very much lead to characters being misinterpreted. Frankly, I'm neither a Jax fan or a hater. I love every character in the circus. But I feel like if you misinterpret his character, you're not only mischaracterizing him, but the characters that overreact with him like Pomni. Honestly, Jax's lander would eventually become Pomni's lander, and it would bleed into the other character if as well. I just want people to have a balanced take on them. I'm not a Jax hater, but I'm not even a Jax lover. I appreciate his complexity as a character, but still dislike him. I don't think he deserves to abstract or be alone forever, because although what he did is bad, it's not as bad as murder. I just wish he would realize he inflicted real pain on Ragatha and Gangle. I want him to mature and become a better person. Also, Funny Bunny, Jester Doll, and Bunny Doll fans are equally annoying. I don't know why they reign superiority over one another when at the end of the day, none of them are canon. And by the way, can anyone tell me why the Amazing Digital Circus ship names are so weird? Funny Bunny sounds like a My Little Pony OC. The Fake Cat says, the world building isn't as important as the narrative. With such a short amount of episodes, we shouldn't focus about why the company backed this project, why or how all these characters got into the game. What's important is, will they or won't they escape? Are these actually people, or is the Soma theory true? What will happen in the end if it turns out they can't escape? I agree on some of this. I personally don't care about why the project was abandoned, but I still would like to know the circumstances of why the characters put the headset on. We know why Pomni did it, and it led us to know more about her as a character. I would be equally interested in knowing how the others entered the circus. But yes, what matters most is finding out if there is an exit or not. Janie Coral says, people hating on Ragatha just because she showed her negative side just the one time, proving her point why she needs to be positive all the time. That scene was sad. First she described her abusive mother and nobody cared. Then she snapped once, only for the narrative to call her out. I'm glad she got her moment with Kinger in the next episode. And finally, Cute Belly Rolls says, Pomni is my least favorite character in the show, alongside with Gangle. I personally don't like them as much as the other characters, but I understand why people like them. They're just not for me and don't interest me as much much as the others. I disagree on Pomni, but I completely agree on Gangle. It's not like I hate her, I just find her the least interesting of the cast. So what we got from your unpopular opinions is that Jax is a spotlight hog, Ragatha deserves better, and shipping wars ruin everything. As always, thanks for watching, and have a great day.